This is the delivery, or a long damn walk for some garden mulch, abridged. The last time Mabel saw her sister, they got in a huge fight about something stupid. In fact, every time Mabel saw her sister, they got in a huge fight about something stupid. Their visits always went like this. One or the other of them would make the 3-day trek to the other one's house. They would eat every snack possible out of the pantry. They would laugh so hard that they couldn't breathe. They would say some true things that they had never said out loud. And then they would get in a huge fight about something stupid. This time, the fight was about pollinators. It was about pollinator attracting plants, to be specific. See, Mabel's sister was a gardening guru, and she had made the 3-day trek to Mabel's house to help her plant this year's garden. And now, she thought that gave her free reign over the entire operation, and she was insisting that Mabel plant flowers. She shook a little paper twist of seeds in Mabel's face and said, "Just plant the flowers! Just put them in the ground and wait for them to grow. Think about the bees." And Mabel said, "There is a whole forest right on the other side of my garden wall. It's a waste of space. The bees are fine." And her sister threw down the paper twist and said, "Fine, plant whatever you want. I don't care." She picked up her stuff and she stomped down the garden path and called over her shoulder, "You're impossible!" And Mabel said, "Yeah, go tell the hag about it." And she slammed the front door, bang. Now, the story inside our story is the hag. Now, the hag, the story goes, lives up on top of the mountain, this mountain right here. And the hag can make impossible things happen. And we all know that the hag is there because there's always 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, 365 and a quarter days a year, however many days there are. There's a smoke trail going from the top of that mountain up into the sky. Now, some people say the hag keeps that fire smoking with human flesh.
Ooh.
Some people say it's like a magical eternal flame sort of thing. Most people don't say anything at all about it.
Yeah.
They just look for that smoke trail when stuff gets hard. Now, Mabel wasn't worried about her sister. She had planted every garden between here and her own home. She was going to be safe and have places to stay. But the next day, Mabel untwisted that paper twist, and she took out those flower seeds and she stuck them in the ground. Bees. So she put them there. And when that garden started to sprout, Mabel wrote a letter. "Dearest, stubbornest sister mine, I sacrificed some of my zucchini plot for your stupid flowers. The garden is coming up great, thank you. Word is that the fighting is coming closer. Stay far away from it. Keep safe. Mabel." And under her name, she scribbled a few words as kind of an apology. And if you knew Mabel's handwriting, you would know it was supposed to be read like this: "I love you." Now, that was all in the past. On the day that our story begins, Mabel is standing in her garden, watching flames dance through the forest, holding a bucket of water. And Mabel has fire inside. She is ready to meet that fire with her own fire. And out of the flames runs a young man. He's wearing a uniform from one army or the other, it doesn't really matter. And he's got a satchel over his chest and a pillbox hat, and his hair is smoking. And he holds out a letter to Mabel and he says, "I'm sorry." And Mabel recognizes that letter. It's her own handwriting and her sister's address, and it is unopened. When that fire got close enough to dance through Mabel's garden and eat the front half of her house, she let it. Now, time passes. The fires burn themselves out. The skeletons of trees stabbed sharp fingers into a sky the color of bayonet steel. Oh. And finally, the only smoke trail to be seen was the one that had always been there, the one that would always be there. And Mabel rolled into a cycle that had nothing to do with where the sun was in the sky. She slept for as long as she could. She got out of bed when she woke up. She pounded a piece or two of her house back together, mostly just to tire herself out. She gnawed on some food without really tasting it. And then she sat in her garden right there in the dirt with her hands in her lap, folding and refolding that letter and staring at the blackened dirt that she knew was so destroyed that nothing would ever grow there again. And every once in a while, Mabel would whisper those words, Go tell the hag about it. The last words she had said to her sister, the words that this letter was supposed to make up for. Now finally, Mabel hoisted her front door, the last piece of her house, up with her shoulder, and she tied it in place with thick leather straps. She sat in the dirt, gazing at the blackened dirt. Nothing's ever going to grow here, folding and refolding that letter. But there, right next to you, a charred black rock, a tiny hint of pale green. Barely there, just pushing up through the dirt. Impossible. And Mabel felt something pushing up inside her too, something green and growing, something impossible. And she whispered those words, go tell the hag about it. And Mabel stood to her feet and she thrust that letter in the air and she said, I'm going to deliver this letter to my sister who is dead! I said it was impossible. Mabel gathered everything that she might need into a satchel she strapped onto her back. She tied a leather bag to her belt and placed that letter right inside there, nice and safe. And she started walking towards that smoke trail she could see in the sky, just one step at a time. And that's how Mabel made it to the hag. The wind blew eddies of dust across Mabel's toes as she stepped into the clearing at the top of the mountain. In the center of the clearing, there was a fire pit, and she didn't see any human bones. It didn't seem very magical. She didn't really know about these things. Over here was a spindly tree with some bright-ass colored laundry hanging off of it to dry, and over here a small hut. So Mabel hiked up her satchel, started walking toward the hut, and suddenly the laundry on the tree came alive, climbed down the tree, turned, and said, yeah? And Mabel said, are you the hag? No, that is a stupid question. You're the hag. Hi, Mabel. I need something impossible. And the hag said, oh, totally. All right, okay, so I'm gonna need you to bring me, this is so good. Bring me something that is both priceless and worthless. And Mabel said, priceless and worthless? Those are opposite things. That's impossible. And the hag said, yeah, right? One impossible thing for another. It's like a fair trade. And Mabel said, no, okay, that actually makes a lot of sense. So, where could a person find something that is both priceless and worthless? And the hag said, oh my God, you know what? Over there in the cave of darkness and despair, there's a giant pile of gems. You could probably find something really good there. Oh, but you know what? That's like totally underneath a dragon. Oh my God, but you could totally tame the dragon if you have a magical snake vine from the swamp of suckage. Oh no. But if you cut the snake vines with just like a regular knife or whatever, they lose all their magical properties and then they're not magical snake vines, they're just regular snake vines. That's not gonna work. Oh my God, but I bet the knife of nicking would totally work for that. Oh no, but the knife of nicking is like right in the middle of the maze of lost souls right now. Sad face. And Mabel said, I'm sorry, did you say dragon? That's like a fairy tale. I know, right? It's impossible. And Mabel said, well, so is getting out of bed some days. And she turned and made her way to the maze of lost souls, one step at a time. Now Mabel entered the maze of lost souls, and immediately there are 5 switchbacks all in a row. So by the time she was about 10 steps in, no light could make it in from outside. And it was so dark. Mabel felt like the world had ended. Or maybe like the world had never begun in the first place. She put a hand out on a wall just to locate herself in space. And she kept going, one step at a time. And there were times that she got so tired that she needed to sleep. But she knew if she laid down and closed her eyes, she would lose all sense of direction, get all turned around, and she would never get out of this maze to deliver this damn letter. So she kept her hand on the wall, and she kept walking one step at a time. Now, Mabel didn't know this, but this is one of the 3 best ways to get out of a maze. You just follow one wall until you get to somewhere. Works every time. So So finally, Mabel turned a corner, and there was light. And Mabel said, "Oh my God, that's so bright, my eyes! Ugh, that is terrible!" And she was in a huge cavern. And at the top of the cavern, there was a single hole leading to the outside. And through that hole was a sunbeam that dropped right down onto a marble podium. And on top of this podium was a dagger of pure silver with diamonds and rubies embedded in a spiral around the hilt. The knife of nicking. So Mabel grabbed the knife of nicking, shoved it into her leather bag, and she saw that just a few paces away from the podium, there was a ladder that went straight up to that hole in the sky. And it was so tall. Mabel did not think that she could make it in one climb. She was probably going to fall off. But there was light at the top of that ladder. And the only other option was to turn around and dive back into the darkness of the maze of lost souls. So Mabel started to climb. Now the Swamp of Suckage is kind of exactly what you think it is, but it's like the thrift store couch version of the nastiest, dankest swamp that you can imagine. It's all sort of like worn out and drab. There's a slick of something shiny across all of the water. All of the trees are really stumpy, and entwined in all of their branches are these thick vines, mostly dead. And every step felt like she was lifting a sack of potatoes with her toes. And Mabel stood there and she said, "This sucks." And just then, the clouds moved away from the sun, and the sun shone down, and she could see that some of the vines in those branches glittered. And she said, "Yeah, no, of course, magical vines, of course they glitter. Why not? This is ridiculous." And she went over to the closest one, and she took that knife of nicking. And she uses her left hand. As soon as that blade touched the magical vine, the vine whipped to life, and it said, "Stop there! No one claims the vine snake without a struggle." And it began to whip and curl and knot itself and glitter in the sun, and Mabel just literally could not. She knew that she was supposed to be part of this in some way, but oh my God, how obnoxious. And she really wanted to leave, but she knew if she left without that snake vine, she would never deliver this damn letter. So instead, she found a swampy stump and sat down with her hands in her lap, folding and refolding that letter, gazing as the vine snake twisted itself into knots and untwisted itself and hissed at her in her face. And Mabel didn't know it, but this is the only way to defeat a vine snake, is to let it wear itself out. So finally, eventually, the vine snake dangled there off of its branch, and it said, "You've succeeded. I am slain." Ugh. And that vine snake turned back into a snake vine. Mabel cut off a big chunk of it with her knife of nicking, coiled it up to her belt, and left the Swamp of Suckage one at a time. The cave of darkness and despair. It's actually really beautiful. It looks like it's underwater. There's light refracting from across the ceiling and around the walls, where it has shined off of all of the gold and the silver and the gems that are in a huge pile in the center of the room, right underneath a dragon. And Mabel said, "A dragon? That's a real dragon? I thought it was a metaphor. Okay." And the dragon, luckily though, was awake, or was asleep. So quietly she could, Mabel untied her snake vine and she tied it into loops. She was like, "I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to try my best." She tied it into a loop and she took it and she kind of threw it towards the dragon. And as soon as that snake vine touched the dragon woke up. And so did the vine snake, who took one look at the dragon and said, "Oh, hell no," and slithered off. So now Mabel's alone, and the dragon says, "Which of my treasures do you wish for, wanderer?" And Mabel said, "That one, I guess." And she pointed at the closest one, which was a pearl. It was a black pearl, larger than a fist, and the surface of it swirled with pink and blue. And the dragon said, "Ah, the highlight of my hoard. Now comes your challenge. The stronger your desire for this priceless pearl, the stronger will be my dragon flame. Prepare yourself. And the dragon took a big, deep breath, and flames poured out of the dragon's lips and wrapped themselves around Mabel and enveloped her and cinched her down to a crisp. At least that's what the dragon expected to happen. That's what always happened. But this time, here's what actually happened. The dragon took a big, deep breath, and two little tendrils of smoke came out of the dragon's nostrils. And she said, "What? You don't even want this priceless treasure." And Mabel said, "No, I really don't, but I need it." And she walked over and picked up the pearl, and she tried to put it in that leather bag, but it was already full. So she took out that beautiful silver dagger, and the diamonds and rubies shined themselves in the dragon's eyes. And she said, "You know what, I don't really want this either, so fair trade?" And Mabel didn't know it, but making a fair trade with the dragon is the only way to escape their cave alive. So the dragon nodded very regally, very slow. And she took the knife and she tossed it onto the dragon's hoard, clink. And then she backed out of the cave of darkness and despair. Wind, dust, fire pit, spindly tree, hut, yes? We're back in the clearing. Mabel walks into the clearing. She holds up the pearl and says, "Is this gonna work?" And the laundry comes alive, climbs down the tree, turns around and goes, "I don't know, what is it?" And Mabel says, "I don't know, it's like a priceless, it's a pearl." And the hag says, "Oh my God, yes! Okay, so like to humans, it's totally beautiful and priceless, but to the oyster, it was basically just a zit. So I think that's gonna work. Throw it on the fire, let's see what happens." And so Mabel gets herself ready. She takes that very tattered letter out of her leather bag and she holds the pearl and she gently rolls this beautiful black pearl into the fire. And the fire blazes pearlescent black for just a moment. And that was it. Nothing else happened. And nothing continued to happen. And all of the fire that had been stuck in Mabel's toes and her legs and her belly raged up. And she took that letter and she said, "This is ridiculous! I did everything! I went through the maze! And I walked through the swamp and my boots are still wet! And I tackled a dragon! And it didn't work! None of it worked!" And she took the letter and she threw it into the fire. The fire shot a column of white and fuchsia flame up into the sky, and it shaped itself into a woman. And she was in her gardening grubbies with a hand on one hip and one eyebrow raised. It was Mabel's sister. And Mabel said, "I wrote you that letter, but it got returned because you're... Anyway, I need you to know what it says. The garden was doing great until it burned down. And the fighting is coming closer, and you were supposed to stay away from it, and I am so mad at you. And, I love you." And the fire, back into the fire pit, and up rose a cloud of pure white smoke. And it blew across the clearing and wrapped itself around Mabel like a hug until it condensed down into a solid ball right over her heart. And Mabel gasped like she was taking her first breath. Oh my God, it's so good! I get it. Okay, so the letter meant everything to you, but to anyone else it just looked like a worthless piece of trash. That is totes Brill. How do you feel? And Mabel said, I feel awake. And I feel not happy, but I feel like I could be happy again. The hag was stooped over the fire pit, scooping up ashes. And the hag took them over and tucked them into Mabel's leather bag and patted her and said, "You should take that. It makes a great mulch." And then turned and climbed her way back up into the tree. And Mabel said, "Mulch. Okay, a mulch." And she turned and she started down the mountain. And as she walked, she was thinking about where she might sleep tonight. or where she might forage for dinner. And she was thinking about how to spread this mulch throughout her garden. And as she walked, she noticed that all of the tiny yellows and the medium pinks and the big purples, all the flowers that she'd seen on her way up the mountain, they were just starting to bloom. Her journey had been so long that they were now going to seed. And so she tapped a couple of tiny black specks out of this one. And she twisted a whole dead head off of this one. And she tucked them all into her little leather bag, nice and safe. When she got home, she would put them in the ground and wait for them to grow. Thank you.